Let's put that genie back in the bottle.
Paints with the colors of the wind, bitch.
It's time for 2 Finger Point.
Power daddy.
Our shoes are in the pond.
Extra magic hours, which we in turn called extra tragic hours.
People called him the naked mole rat.
Did you really just 2 Finger Point?
Here are your hosts, Amber and Kylie.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of 2 Finger Point. I'm Amber.
And I'm Kylie.
And so we're going to do something a little kind of
Thank you
fun
for listening to 2 Finger Point,
our
hosted
Halloween
by Amber
episode,
Omar
'cause
and
happy
Kylie
Halloween!
Salmon.
Happy
Created by Amber
Halloween,
Omar
everybody.
and Kylie Salmon. Produced by Amber Omar.
For those who don't know,
Engineered by
we're going to be
Kylie
talking
Salmon.
about
Social
the city
media
of
managed by
Celebration,
Kylie
Florida.
Salmon. Content created by
And
Amber
Kylie's gonna roll
Omar
into
and
what
Kylie
that is,
Salmon.
but then
Stay connected with
we're
us
also
by following
going
us
to
on
we
Instagram,
have two
TikTok,
different
Facebook, or
stories,
YouTube at
about
2
some
Finger
true crime
Point
cases that actually
Podcast,
happened
with the
in
number 2
Celebration,
spelled
Florida.
out TWO.
So we'll break down the city,
You can
kind of
also
what it is,
contact us
what's,
by
you know,
visiting our
what's so
website at
special or maybe sinister about it.
2fingerpointpodcast.com.
And then
Be
we'll
sure
roll
to
into
subscribe to our
true crime.
podcast to have new
Yes,
episodes
so
automatically downloaded to
Before
your
we get into
device
this,
or to get alerts of our new
if you're not into
episodes
the
on
spooky
YouTube.
stuff, if you're not
We'd greatly
into true
appreciate you
crime,
reading
maybe
and
this is
reviewing
the
the
episode
podcast
for
as
you.
well. You could be selected to have
We
your
wanted to
review
throw in
read on the
our
podcast,
favorite
like this
stuff
review here from
for
our friend
Halloween.
Zoe.
So,
My Disney podcast
we are
fix.
stepping
Amber
into the
and
true crime
Kylie have put together the
podcasting
perfect
for
podcast
today.
about all things
We
Disney.
will, and there will
Love
be
to hear
some
their
trigger
banter,
warnings
their
when we come up
opinions,
to
their
our story. So
recommendations,
if you want
and
to,
I love
you know,
following
go into
along
kind
with
of
their
what we're
quiz
doing
at
with
the
the
end of
history
each
and then kind of
episode.
stop at those
You know it's a
stories,
good
we'll give you the
podcast when
trigger
you find
warnings so
yourself
you can kind
chiming
of
in.
stop and know where to
Listening
like
to them
you can
every week
skip or
puts
not
me
listen.
feeling connected
Yes.
to the parks, even when I'm
So,
far away.
but getting
Thanks,
into
ladies.
it, so
And
what
thank you,
is
Zoe, for
Celebration
your kind
Florida?
review. We will catch you next
Celebration is a
Tuesday for our
community
next
that was
episode, but
originally
until
founded
then,
by the
have a
Walt Disney
magical
Company
day.
in 1996, back when we were 5 years old. The community was built to build an example of, quote, new urbanism, which is a design concept that promotes environmentally friendly habits by creating walkable neighborhoods. And the prime focus of Celebration is its walkability, neighborhood parks, convenient shopping, and traditional home designs that allow for less dependence on automobiles.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. So basically, like, from what I've done research and seen, it's a kind of a community that's a one-stop shop. You can live here, you can shop here, socialize here, work here, and never leave. No, I'm just kidding. But it was the idea that like you really didn't have to go anywhere. And as a reclusive introvert, I've got to say this would not be good for me, or it would be almost too great because it's pretty much like pulling teeth to get me to go to like large crowded areas because it's like it's a hassle, right? Everyone's kind of moving to their own pace. It's hard to get through and, you know, go do things. So now you're creating a space where I never have to leave and all the things I need are right here. Like, count me the fuck in. And just to give some background on what I remember, so like, and maybe you can chime into to what you remember as well, Kylie. Like, we lived pretty close to Celebration where we were. I don't think it was very far, and if you kind of just jetted off in like maybe 5 or 10 miles in a certain direction, you kind of could see the archway of like what was Celebration.
Yeah, it now is not like Walt Disney Company's released it, and so now it's like
Yeah.
unincorporated land, but it's like part of Kissimmee, which we're both
Yeah.
familiar with. It was like, I don't know, 2 blocks down from our apartment. It was like Kissimmee border.
You're right. I forgot about that.
So yeah, we were pretty close. And I remember like swiping on like Snapchat or Instagram for like the location so you could like mark it. And sometimes it would say Celebration, Florida.
Interesting. That doesn't surprise me. So yeah, we were basically a stone's throw away from this place. And I just remember like I remember going through patterns of thought to be like, at first I was like, wow, it must be really hard to live there. Like, how could you like, you know, how do you get into such a small community like that at all? And then I shifted to thinking, well, because the way Orlando's laid out, maybe it's a retirement community. Like these are old people that don't have to leave. So it's an easy place for them to kind of do stuff where they don't have to go anywhere. And then I don't know if I came up to this conclusion on my own or if maybe there were some weird whispers around the Disney park because you know how like Disney employees are. They love to spit like rumors out.
Yes.
But I felt like it was like a cult place, like a little cookie cutter Stepford Wives type of like situation.
Yes.
You know?
Stepford, I didn't know if you're familiar with the Stepford Wives, but that was my exact thoughts.
Yeah. So that was always my thought. And I never got an answer, but it seems like it's just a normal community, but I swear it's not. There's something wrong with that community.
There is, and that's why we're talking about it today.
That's why we're here. Man, I just like low key would love to just kind of walk in there and just kind of see. And you can just walk in there and you can be a
Mhm.
tourist. So maybe the next time I'm in Orlando, which
Yeah,
I don't know
I
when that'll
mean,
be.
I think they do a lot of rentals like Airbnb and stuff too. So if you want to stay there, I believe you can stay on vacation.
Huh. Okay. I don't know if I'd want to stay there overnight. Sounds
I
a little
don't
scary.
recommend it. I wouldn't.
No thanks. But yeah, so anyway, actually Celebration was kind of based on a concept of something that Walt Disney had wanted to do, but never kind of got the idea to come to fruition in his lifetime. So in 1966, the year he passed, one of the last times he made a television appearance, he described his vision for a futuristic city. He described a city that would never cease to be a blueprint for the future. It would consist of an industrial park, a green belt, an urban center where people would live. This utopian world, as Disney saw it, would have begun with an experimental prototype community of tomorrow, aka Epcot, to be built in Orlando. So also, I was doing some research, and this was so funny to me, but it's less of a concept that sounds wild, but just imagine like hearing this in 1966. He
Right.
wanted to put a dome over this entire community slash city so that they could climate control it. Which low key, okay, we're like, what the fuck, government? Like, get out of my
Yeah,
life.
very dystopian.
But in 1966, can you imagine someone you'd be like, this crackpot?
I mean, honestly, if Walt Disney was saying it to me and was like, "Do you want to come live here?" Sure, why not? But
You're right.
I'm just curious what Walt Disney would have created if he were still here, if he, had lived maybe even another 30 years. I wonder what the world would be like.
You're right. He had very interesting ideas that were well beyond the decades that he was in.
Yes, he was definitely an innovator and in a way an inventor.
Yeah, exactly. So, but anyway, yes. Oh, yeah, I put the same thing again about the acronym. I don't know why. But his idea ended up being scaled down and then completely scrapped altogether until they executed and completed in 1996 the City of Celebration, which though his concept was meant to kind of be a little bit more futuristic, they kind of used the bones of what he was talking about, which was like this community that was less focused on these means for transportation and kind of having a one-stop shop where you could be in an area where you could work and live. That was kind of his concept of things.
And
So
surprise, we all live under a dome that's weather controlled. No, I'm joking.
right. Isn't that a conspiracy, I think?
It is. I'm totally being a jokester right now.
No, I know, but I was like, I'm pretty sure. It was funny because when I did this research, I was like, isn't this a conspiracy from somewhere? So,
Oh yeah, there's theories out there.
But yeah.
Yeah, so just a little timeline from conception or from concept to conception. So in December 15th of 1996, the Disney company comes to Florida, and very sadly, this is also the day that Walt Disney passes from his battle with lung cancer. So that's 5 years later, October 1st, 1971, Magic Kingdom opens for the very first time. August 1st in 1975, Walt Disney Village opens, which is now, well, at a time when we were there, it was Downtown Disney. Today, it is called Disney Springs. So that has been a thing since the 70s, which is wild to me.
Same.
On October 1st, 1981, Epcot opens. That that clicks with me.
Oh,
Like,
it does?
just because some of that stuff is very much 80s, like some of the rides.
You're right.
It
You're
makes
right.
sense now.
You're like, okay, I see the correlation. No,
Like
it
we
totally
have
makes sense.
Captain EO, the Michael Jackson thing, and the mission space is very 1980s.
You're
Like,
so right.
this checks out. March 1st, 1984, Michael Eisner and Peter Rummel become the head developers to expand Walt's idea of a new urbanism community. So around June of 1987, a competition begins to select the developers, which that's got to be a huge deal for a housing development company, like to build the housing for Disney.
Oh, yeah.
That's a huge notch
And
on
to
the
say you
belt.
did it later
Yeah.
on too, right?
So I'm sure that was very competitive. And then July 1st of 1989, 2 years later, Walt Disney World Park expansion was announced. And August 1st of 1991, Walt Disney World announces their plan to build Celebration. So in 2 years, they've gone from we're expanding the parks to, hey, we're building an actual place where you can live here. So on March 29th, 1994, they break ground and start building Celebration. And November 18th of 1995, the lottery is announced for the first resident of Celebration.
That's pretty
Wild.
cool.
Like, imagine just being like, yeah, I was the first person to live in this community, owned by Disney, built by Disney,
Yeah.
designed by Walt Disney. Like, it's nuts.
The clout.
The clout. And so not even a year later, on June 18th of 1996, the first family moves in. And on November 18th of 1996, they celebrated Founders Day. So that's the history of Celebration.
And then just to give some current stats of Celebration, Florida, as of 2021, because I guess that was the last time they did like a census or, whatever it is to get the data for this. Don't quote me. I'm not what do you call those people?
Economist, sociologist.
Yeah, I'm not that. Those people, any of those. So in 2021, population in Celebration was 11,264. Median age was surprising to me. It was 37.6. That's pretty low. So you've got, median.
It's the Disney adults.
But the fact that they can afford it. So
yeah.
So poverty rate is, the poverty rate is low, but I guess I don't understand exactly how we get this ratio. So I don't know how low this is, but the rate is 2.76 in Celebration.
I think putting that together with the median age, that's the surprising part. Because I'm sure people are our age and a little bit older, a little bit younger, are doing whatever they have to do to go in there.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like they're going to go into a lot of debt.
You're probably right. That's probably why that 2% is there, almost 3%. Because the median household income here is $92,110, which is pretty high, I would say, for Florida. But Orlando, I don't know what the average is in Orlando, so I feel like that's pretty relative. Yeah. But median property value, why do I keep saying medium? Because it's median and medium. They do this to you. The median property value is $533,700. So that's pretty average, I would say, for Florida. A little bit elevated.
This was definitely when it was like that little small pocket of time where it was the time to buy before the market shot up. Because now, for $500,000, you can get your basic cookie cutter home in Arizona where everything's supposedly cheap. So I guarantee you this is not an accurate price on a current price of the house.
Because I was surprised by the price of the house too. I would assume that it would.
There's no way.
It's probably somewhere close to like 8 or 9, if not at the million at this point. You would think, right?
You know what?
I couldn't find it, but let's check. Maybe you.
Yeah, I'm gonna Let's see what we can find.
Okay, sleuth it out for me.
All right. So we have a 5-bedroom, 5-bath, which is a good size home. But this it's almost 1.4 million. 4-bed, 4-bath, 1.2 million. What is this? 3. Okay, here. Okay. Actually, we have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath for 539,000.
Okay.
So,
But how long has it been on the market? Because it could have started at like 800 and they could have dropped it because they couldn't sell it.
True. I'm not sure. And it
Are you
could
on
have
Zillow?
actually no, I'm on a realtor's
Yeah, I mean, oh wow. See, a 4-bedroom starts at almost 800,000, but these 3 bedrooms, for some reason, they don't sell above like 500, almost 600.
yeah. So it looks like for about a little less than 1,800 square feet, you can get it for a little over half a million. And I guess this one that's 1.3 is almost 4,000 square feet, but
These prices are pretty like they're a shot up of. So these houses that are 3 bedrooms, like they were not this expensive before. Like they were somewhere around 350,000, and they shot up a couple 100,000 in the last.
I'm gonna guess the median property value is probably between 8 and 900.
Yeah, easily when they reevaluate that. I wonder when they'll do the reevaluation of that city, because I'd be curious.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's pretty high. So this was right before, you're right, the big kind of shift of prices.
So now that you've gotten to know Celebration a little bit, we've got some stories. There's a dark side to this community. It is not just little suburbia, because we know there's no such thing as innocent little suburbia, as we
No.
mentioned, Stepford Wives. So we both have stories, and Amber's going to tell you a little story about Matteo Giovanditto.
Yes. And so my story was actually, and I don't know how accurate this is, but this is how a lot of the news outlets and all the articles I read were kind of profiling it, was as the first murder in Celebration. And so this happened around Thanksgiving 2010. So as some of the articles said, and we'll post all the, links and stuff, but it's so hard to keep up with them as you're talking, so I'll just post them all. And so it said the brutal 2010 murder of Matteo Patrick Giovanditto was the first killing in the planned community of Celebration, Florida, built by Walt Disney Company near Disney World. And so Giovanditto's body was discovered by neighbors on the kitchen floor sometime in November of 2010. They say around Thanksgiving, so I'm assuming sometime around the end of it. But because he was found, like no one knows officially when he was killed. Or died, I should say. Dun, dun, dun. And oh, actually, you know what? Let's cut this piece in really quick. Before I begin my story, guys, I will give a huge trigger warning. This has a lot of SA in it. If you are unfamiliar with what SA is, I will say it once. I don't like to use the term. It is sexual assault, and sexual abuse. So if you are not into it or it makes you really uncomfortable, as it should most people, I mean, I'll try to be as respectful as possible, but if you feel like you can't handle it, that's okay. You can skip my story. I would not be mad about it. Anyway, so back to, so just to give some background on Matteo, he was 58 and was a retired teacher who had a long, it gets great. You'll hate it by the end. I feel dirty. I have a sage candle burning because I feel so dirty.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
These stories are really dark.
Yeah. And which is what makes it all so much more sinister, which is the whole point of why we gave a background of like what Celebration is. You can kind of really feel how dark it kind of feels that these people were having, or these things were happening within such a cookie cutter like community.
Mm-hmm.
And what should have been extremely happy. So yes, so he was a retired teacher who had a longtime love of all things Disney, and according to his neighbors, he claimed to be counseling troubled youth. And then the principal of the school that he worked at previously, named Rowena Kovler, and he worked at Learman Day School. It was a private Jewish school. But he was described as an excellent employee who was adored by his students. This just makes me feel all the more dirty. So basically, like, I'm gonna have to bounce around a little bit to kind of give a full story, but basically what I'm gonna do is I'll explain like what kind of, I guess I can explain like how he died. So the brutality of his crime is pretty gruesome. So he was found strangled with a shoelace and hacked with an axe in his condominium.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so pretty rough.
That is like horror movie.
It is. However, the person who did it, I mean, I don't, approve of like the whole, don't kill people, but he felt like I feel like he had a reason. So
Okay.
this guy, his name was David Israel Zenon Murillo. He was a 30-year-old transient. And basically, he said that Giovanditto approached him one day and offered him money to wash his Corvette. And this was around in the 80s, because this is when a lot of the things that were kind of happening were in the 80s. And Morello said Giovanditto gave him a beer, and then Morello fell asleep. And then he awoke to find Giovanditto on top of him, attempting to SA him as he lay face down.
Oh gosh. Okay, so I'm assuming this was a troubled youth.
Yeah, so he's 30-year-old. He's 30s wow.
Well,
Can
back
I
in the
s-
80s, I'm gonna assume he was a troubled
Younger.
youth that Giovandetto was working with.
Exactly. So
Oh,
so he ends up being the one to kill him.
okay.
He's convicted. And so what happens is, just to give some background to this was obviously in Florida, and they do have the death penalty in Florida. So just to give that out there. And so basically what ends up happening is he goes through trial, and he's first tried with first-degree murder, which is premeditated murder.
Mhm.
However, he ends up getting second-degree murder, which I don't know the legalities on it, but there's like, I guess it's like something with emotion is what I was kind of understanding. Like you act with impulsive emotion based on like what had happened or whatever. So I guess based on like what had happened to him, they assumed that they took it down to second degree.
Okay.
Um, and so basically he got life in prison. In addition to serving life in prison, Morello must pay, or he was set to pay $2,869 for the cost of prosecution, $5,000 for the defense attorney, and he had to pay $418 dollars in court costs and $100 for the cost of prosecution. And then he ended up having to pay $2,079 in restitution. But to whom? I
have no
didn't get
idea.
information. Sorry. No, I'm just saying like he was the victim ultimately, and yet he's having to pay all these fees, and I understand like don't kill people, but like at the same time, this guy was sick.
Yeah,
So
I don't know.
I know, sorry. No, I'm telling you.
No, I know.
It's
I'm
dirty,
not
I
a
know.
judge, and I work hard to get out of jury duty because
Girl. Me too. So basically this kind of, after all of this started coming out, people started coming forward and giving statements, like as this trial's going on, basically about other SA incidents that Giovanditto had been a part of throughout the 80s. So this was kind of happening throughout the 80s. And so in one article, an anonymous mother said that Giovanditto, who she described as a cunning pedophile predator, developed disgusting. If a mother is saying that, first of all, you know
yeah.
that mom means it.
Mhm.
She said that he developed a close relationship with her 10-year-old son when she enrolled him in a summer camp at Crossroads Academy in Florida, where he was a head teacher. The single mother then said the teacher appeared to take her son under his wing, even treating him to trips abroad to countries including Mexico, Japan, and China, until the boy suddenly cut all ties with Giovanditto at the age of 14. She claims she later learned the son's mentor had been SAing him for years.
Gosh.
First of all, I mean, no judgment to the mom, but why are you letting your son go on international trips with a teacher alone? It seems a little odd in that,
Yeah. Unless, it sounds like she's saying this after the fact. This was like after he died, right?
Yeah.
So maybe she had no idea because she said he cut off contact with
Yeah.
him at 14. Maybe she had no idea.
That he was
And
going internationally though? Like to
oh
Japan?
no, what was going on?
Oh,
Because
no, she didn't.
this is a teacher, right? So she's
Yeah.
trusting that the school is hiring safe people.
You're
And
right.
he gets an opportunity to go. Obviously, he needs a chaperone.
You're absolutely right, and especially if the kid's not saying anything, right? We don't ever
Yeah,
know.
it sounds like she maybe didn't know until after he was 14, is my
Yeah.
guess.
No, I'm assuming that too. So it's just it's crazy how silent these things can happen and nobody knows. It's really sick.
Yeah.
In people who are supposed to be safe spaces. And then there was another incident as well of somebody who stepped forward, describing himself as a pretty quiet kid. He said the teacher had taken an interest in him and pushed him to excel, and that the pair quickly began spending time together outside of school hours. The named only as D is what the kid wanted to be known as. The man said sexual contact between himself and the teacher stopped only when his mother suddenly banned him from seeing Giovanditto outside of the classroom. So basically, I guess her
That
mom
mom
must have
knew.
got it. Yeah, the mom knew. So, like, ultimately, the guy who ended up killing this guy did get life in prison, as people who, kill people probably should. However, this was even more sinister than like it wasn't just a quick little murder. Like,
Right.
it was kind of wrapped up in a bunch of things. So that's kind of
Oh.
that's how that kind of ended up. It was pretty brutal. So that was the first murder in Celebration. My God, way to go start one with a bang, I guess.
Yeah. Well, thank you for
No.
sharing that.
So sorry to everybody.
So about 10 years later is when we had our second case of murder. And this is the Todt Family Murders. So my trigger warnings, we have murder, animal cruelty, and drugging. So I fully understand if you don't want to listen. So we have Anthony Todt, and he had a rough childhood. He was originally from Philadelphia. And interesting recurring theme here to Amber's story. His father was a special education teacher and a wrestling coach who ended up hiring a former student to kill his wife, aka Anthony's mother. So let's break that down for a moment here. He's a special education teacher, so he abused a child with special needs and manipulated them and convinced them to kill his wife.
You got to be a special sick.
Yeah, definitely something wrong in your head to have the goal to do that. That is just disgusting on so many levels. But in a plot twist, she lives.
Yes, queen.
Loretta lives, Anthony's mother. So she survives. Obviously, his father goes to jail, prison. She divorces him, remarries, and she moves her children to Connecticut. And this is where Anthony grows up and meets Megan, who is a physical therapist and a yoga instructor. So they begin dating, and 2 years later, they get married. And they end up actually opening up a physical therapy clinic together. They have 3 kids, Alec, Tyler, and Zoe, and they end up adopting a dog named Breezy. So Megan retires to become a stay-at-home mom, and Anthony runs the business. And Anthony also has 2 businesses in New York that he's running. And so the kids are, involved in sports and art. The family is well known throughout the community. They know their neighbors. Anthony is known because he volunteers as the youth soccer coach sometimes, and he also works with disabled children. So we have a recurring thing. Just kind of like his father, right?
Mm-hmm.
So while vacationing at Walt Disney World, as the family did every winter, Megan actually gets bit by a tick.
Oh.
And in 2017, she's diagnosed with Lyme disease. And if you're not very familiar with Lyme disease, it is a rough illness. I've heard stories from multiple people who have had to struggle with this illness. There's a lot of fatigue, brain fog, headaches. And with that, comes mental illness as well when you're really dealing with that. And I know it sounds kind of light when you compare it to other illnesses out there. But when you're like, brain fog is real and it really messes with you. I've dealt with brain fog. Luckily, mine was due to an allergy that I didn't know I had. And the physical fatigue of not being able to move your body, it really messes with you.
Yeah.
So needless to say, Megan's dealing with a lot of depression and she's going in and out of bouts of depression, which that's tough on the whole family, especially when you've got 3 kids and a husband, like as that maternal role, that's got to be rough on everybody.
Totally.
In 2019, the Todt family rents a home in Celebration for vacationing during the winter, as they do every year. But this time they decide that they want to stay. So they're renting a home in Celebration. And Anthony still needs to run the businesses in Connecticut and New York.
Mhm.
So he still stays in Connecticut and runs their physical therapy clinic. And he visits them on a weekly basis. So good money there, I guess.
Right. No kidding.
But with everything changing, the Tots change as well. And they go from being, well known and highly involved in the community to being like very reclusive. And they're not active at all in their community of Celebration, which is interesting because that was kind of Walt's vision, right? Was,
Mm-hmm.
A community where everyone, kind of like a village in a way.
Well, and the way that it is, right? Like, it's kind of almost impossible to not be that kind of a community that everyone's talking or knowing each other because, like I said, I don't think you're leaving very often unless you have somewhere else you have to go.
Right. So pretty much everyone knows everyone, I would imagine. And yeah, so things are just kind of going crazy. And Anthony ends up gaining a lot of weight and he gets diagnosed with diabetes.
Oh.
So this family's health is just in decline. Then Anthony is getting into all sorts of trouble business-wise.
Uh-oh.
So an investigation opens up for his business after he's reported for mischarging at the physical therapy clinic. And it's discovered in this investigation that he is charging patients for services that they were never given.
Oh, come on.
He's also taking out multiple loans for his other 2 businesses in New York.
That's always how it follows suit. It's always malpractice and then additional loans.
Yes. So Anthony is a little fraudster, apparently. So he was over $100,000 in debt. And from the looks of it, it seems like the money was going towards the family rental home in Celebration. However, from everything investigators could find, it seems like Megan and the children were in the dark about the fraud that Anthony was committing. So it seems like Anthony was in this scheme on his own.
Yeah.
Now, while this is being investigated in Connecticut, there's another mystery going on in Florida with the Todt family.
Uh-oh.
Now, this is around Christmas. No one has heard from the family in days. So on December 29th, 2019, a family member calls and speaks to Florida police, asking them to do a wellness check on the family. And this would make sense, right? Like, it's around the holidays. So you're in pretty good contact with your family at this time. You're wishing them
Yeah.
happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. So it's kind of bizarre if you don't hear from them.
Yeah, and if not family, friends, somebody's heard from you at this
Yeah,
point, you
or
know?
social media, something.
Exactly.
We're always on our phones. So the police go. They respond to this call, but they weren't able to make contact with any of the Todt family, and they reported no suspicious activity at the home in celebration. So
Hmm.
family and friends create a group on Facebook called Looking for the Todt Family. But peculiar to me, no one ever filed a missing persons report.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was gonna ask next. So, like, my question, and maybe you will answer, so you can tell me if you're gonna answer it later on. Did they initially go in the house to look for them, or did they knock on the
No.
door? Okay, okay.
Yeah, no, they just, yeah, I assume they knocked on the door, nobody answered. Yeah. So,
Okay.
back to the investigation in Connecticut. Federal agents have all the evidence they need. They've, you know, they're ready to arrest him. So they contact Osceola County Sheriff's Department, letting them know what's going down. Anthony Todt has committed A, B, and C crimes. Go get him. So the Sheriff's Department goes to detain Anthony on January 19th, 2020.
Wow.
So this is a little over 20 days. And there's an eviction notice on the door. Apparently, they owed over $6,000 in rent. And there's also mail piling up, they notice. So, at this point they're arresting him. So they break down the door, they get into the house, and they find Anthony. And this is where it gets dark, guys.
Mhm.
He's in there with 5 corpses. And is, news say 4, but I say 5. So they found Megan at the age of 42, Alec at the age of 13, Tyler at the age of 11, and Zoe at the age of 4. And sadly, Zoe was found under her mother's body. And she was so decomposed that police originally didn't even see her. But they ended up seeing her feet under Megan's body, and that's how they found her. And the corpse were found all holding crucifixes in their hands, and they all suffered stab wounds, was the way they went. And so the 4 family members were killed, but also Breezy, the family dog, was found dead in her dog bed.
No.
Yeah. So I say 5 corpses because that is a life just as much as anybody.
Yes.
So of course, they arrest him, and he says he's under the influence of Benadryl, and he was attempting to kill himself at the time. So of course he's got to go to the hospital. And with these crucifixes in their hands, definitely something was wrong in his brain.
Yeah, that was my thought too. I was like, clearly he had maybe like a schizophrenic break or something. Maybe he had a mental illness that was undiagnosed.
Well, that's how it always starts, right? They
Mhm.
always have, like, dad was a messed up individual and his dad was a messed up individual.
Yeah.
It's definitely something genetic. Yeah. And he lets the police know everyone was on Benadryl at that, around that time. So he drugged them. Which I'm kind of confused. Well, I guess he could have given them, like, a lot, but I've never had enough Benadryl to, like, I don't know.
Well, I
It's
guess,
made me go to sleep and go to bed when I'm feeling like crap, but that's about it.
but maybe that was what he was trying to do, because maybe honestly it was easier for him to be a sicko when they were all passed out, because Benadryl low key makes you pass out and you'll wake up, but you're like so groggy that you can't even function sometimes.
Yeah, he must have given them, like, an extreme amount.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he shared with, I mean, his story changed multiple times. Initially, he had said that Megan, had stabbed the children and then stabbed herself. So he tried to pin it on her.
Hmm.
And then he also said he killed everybody and was planning to kill himself and join them in the afterlife. So yeah, definitely not a mentally stable person. Yeah, so Anthony was sentenced to life without parole for his heinous crimes for the murders of his wife and 3 children. And a year after his sentence, he had an additional year added for his crime of animal cruelty for Breezy. I know that additional year is just like petty or whatever because he's got life, but if he had not gotten life and he was only given a year of that, I don't think that's justified.
Yeah, I was gonna say, at least with life, it's kind of one of those things that gives justice to Breezy, because it's like he's not getting out, but we'll just
Right.
give you that additional year to let you know, like, justice for Breezy.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
So that is a story of the Todt family murders. It's very dark, very sad, and not everything in Celebration is what it looks to be.
yeah, and this honestly kind of reads into the Southern Christianity cult-like vibes that can kind of brew in the South occasionally. I don't think it's everywhere, but it definitely does happen in pockets of the South. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was one somewhere in Florida. And it seems like
Yeah.
he was kind of either had a mental illness, or maybe that kind of played into his Christianity plus the mental illness and all that wrapped up.
Yeah, I mean, it could be like schizophrenic too, and like the
Yeah,
voices in his head told him that. But you're right. Like, I feel like every religion has those radicals.
totally.
Every religion has that.
Yeah.
And yeah, he could have been a part of a cult as well.
Yeah. Who's to say? Honestly, I don't think any answer would be satisfying, to be honest. Cause like,
No.
you
And
know,
yeah, and there wasn't anything. So honestly, I'm gonna guess they do have like that serial killer trait or gene or whatever that's
mhm.
in people's brains. Looking at who his father was, I'm gonna guess there's something definitely genetically and chemically wrong with his brain.
Yeah.
But it was really sad. Like,
Yeah. This one is so sad. I mean, both stories were really sad, but this one, like, it's sad in a different way. I feel like it was weird, like, for my story, it was hard to feel sad for the victim, the victim of the murder, because
mhm.
I feel like he created other victims within that story.
Right, it was justice being served in a way.
Yeah, because that was essentially how the story was painted, essentially, and at least that's how, like, it seemed like throughout the articles, they were kind of painting it as well. Whereas this, it's like it seems like, from my perspective, is like also on top of it cleaning up a lot of his messes too. Like, how like a lot sometimes it's like the matriarch, or I'm sorry, patriarch, like they end up having financial problems, and it's kind of like before everyone finds out, let
Yep,
me.
yep,
So
it's a
it's
pride
very
thing.
on par. Yeah. So this is sad. And it just sucks that it happened in such a close little knit community that people kind of really expect it to be a really safe pocket of air, like, community.
Right,
It just goes to show nowhere's unfortunate really, really safe, and you have to just, like, watch your surroundings and just, like, be aware of what's going on.
yeah, definitely. Oh, and I just, like, putting myself in, like, Alex shoes, being 13
Mhm.
years old, and I just don't know, like, I guess I've never been on that level of Benadryl. I really hope that that little boy was
Knocked out.
unconscious the whole time, but just imagine being like, waking up to your father, like, stabbing you to death.
Or stabbing someone else and knowing you're next. I don't know,
True.
either both are
Yeah,
equally bad,
yeah,
because that's a lot of true crime cases where usually
mhm.
there was only supposed to be one, murder victim, but somebody else comes in to try to be the hero, or they're noticed and they also suffer a
Or
fatality.
you hear, like, especially like with the moms that go postal and kill their kids one at a time.
Oh my God. I've seen some
Yeah.
of those stories. It's
Yeah. Was it Jodi Arias?
yeah, that was the one I was
Yeah.
thinking of.
So yeah, thank you for joining if you made it to this point. And go watch Halloween Town, or
Yeah.
zombies. Go watch a happy Halloween movie right now. Twitches. Yeah, go watch something light and breezy. Clear your head. But
Sage
thank
if
you.
you have it.
Yeah, if you're a sager, get that sage. Take some deep breaths. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll catch you November. We've got a lot of fun stuff. We're going to be breaking down the Disney company. So we've got a lot of fun stuff. Next week, we're actually going to walk you through the timeline from before Disney's origin to where we are today. And we've got a lot of stuff in store for the next month that we can't wait to show you. So we will catch you then.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening to Two Finger Point, hosted by Amber Omar and Kylie Salmon. Created by Amber Omar and Kylie Salmon. Produced by Amber Omar. Engineered by Kylie Salmon. Social media managed by Kylie Salmon. Content created by Amber Omar and Kylie Salmon. Stay connected with us by following us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or YouTube at Two Finger Point Podcast, with the number 2 spelled out TWO. You can also contact us by visiting our website at twofingerpointpodcast.com. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast to have new episodes automatically downloaded to your device, or to get alerts of our new episodes on YouTube. We'd greatly appreciate you rating and reviewing the podcast as well. You could be selected to have your review read on the podcast, like this review here from our friend Zoe. My Disney Podcast Fix. Amber and Kylie have put together the perfect podcast about all things Disney. Love to hear their banter, their opinions, their recommendations, and I love following along with their quiz at the end of each episode. You know it's a good podcast when you find yourself chiming in. Listening to them every week has me feeling connected to the parks, even when I'm far away. Thanks, ladies. And thank you, Zoe, for your kind review. We will catch you next Tuesday for our next episode, but until then, have a magical day.